This is actually my third time on the corner, but it never seems to get less scary. So here's my sidekick story, file under bad decisions I made in college. Um, so I am pretty much the opposite of a free spirit. And when I say that, I mean that my life is held together entirely by like a closely woven web of Excel spreadsheets and to-do lists and color-coded folder systems. It's beautiful, really, and it's just the way the world makes sense to me and always has. But there is one thing that always sort of bulldozes its way through like my biological need for order, and that thing is love. And in the spring of 1997, I fell in love for about 3 weeks with a girl named Kathy. And I should have known that Kathy was trouble when this 90-pound girl rolls into my dorm room at midnight with a bottle of Southern Comfort, and we just like spent the whole night intermittently like making out and then taking turns throwing up into my dorm trash can. But, you know, Kathy made me sort of immune to good sense. And 2 weeks into our torrid 3-week love affair, she shows up at my dorm room unexpectedly, again around 11 o'clock on a Saturday night, and tells me that we are going to Boston. So you shouldn't be at all surprised to know that like things started going wrong kind of right away. We were maybe like an hour down the highway, and she informs me that like that toll ticket that you get with the exit number on it, that she has lost it somewhere in the car. It's just gone. We looked everywhere, just gone. And so when we get to the toll booth, her way of working around this was to tell the toll collector that we had actually been dropped from outer space in the middle of the highway and thus had never received a ticket. And somehow she got us through the toll, but we may as well have been dropped from outer space because we were like immediately lost, like horribly, horribly lost. And this was 1997, so like no GPS, no smartphones, no Garmin, and of course it's Kathy, so like no maps. In her car, she had like a tambourine and a crock pot and like the full Chronicles of Narnia series in hardcover, but like no map. So we're just, if you've ever driven to Boston and not really known where you're going, you're just driving around Boston, like around, and you can see it, but you can't get in. And so we're just driving around for hours, and I was cranky, and I was tired, and I had to pee like more than I've ever had to pee in my entire life. And Kathy's just like completely oblivious to the fact that I'm like not having the time of my life, because she's having a great time. And so we see this like shitty roadside 24-hour diner called Bickford's. And we pull in, and we make a beeline for the bathroom. And inside the bathroom, there are these two young girls standing in front of the mirror, and one of them is like nursing this like bleeding eye wound, which is irrelevant, but still notable. And they are having a conversation that goes something like this. What's a pimp doing in a wheelchair? I don't know what a pimp's doing in a wheelchair. What do you think a pimp's doing in a wheelchair? And so on. I mean, I guess standard 2 a.m. fare for Bickford's. So we went, we got our food, and that was actually pretty uneventful. But as we were getting up to leave, who should roll out but a man in head-to-toe black leather, like black leather hat, black leather jacket, black leather shirt. I didn't even know that was a thing. Black leather pants. So yes, there you have it, pimp in a wheelchair. And this climactic moment, I wish I could say, was sort of like the end of our little Boston adventure. But unfortunately, but wait, there's more. So we got back to the car, and of course, again, immediately lost driving around Boston. But this time, Kathy decides that she's going to pull into a gas station and ask for directions, which is like a totally normal, rational human thing to do. So like thumbs up, except that it's Kathy. And so Kathy comes back from the gas station with these 3 random dudes who start piling into the back of her like garbage-filled Geo Metro. And she opens the car door and she's like, hey, this is Pete, Mike, and Edwin. We're gonna give them a ride to Brighton. And I'm like, for the first time in my like young life, I think, this is how I die. This is how I die. And so I just start like chain smoking, like thinking about the headlines that my mom is going to read in the paper the next day, like limbless female torsos found on highway overpass, and like hyperventilating. And I look over at Kathy, completely oblivious to the danger, and she like kicks on the radio and turns to the back seat and says, hey, you guys like the Indigo Girls? And I'm like, shit, this is how I die. Except obviously I didn't die. We were okay. Pete, Mike, and Edwin turned out to be super nice. They paid our tolls. They offered to buy us a pizza. Edwin told us some great stories about going to summer camp in Maine. We were totally sort of mystically, magically fine. And as it turns out, there's sort of like a weird, like incredible high that comes with doing something that's really, really stupid and dangerous and having it turn out okay. And so we dropped Pete, Mike, and Edwin off in Brighton, and we drove around for a few minutes until we found a Walgreens parking lot where we spent an incredible romantic night. The next morning, we finally found our way into Boston, except it was Sunday morning at like 6 a.m. and everything cool was closed, so we just turned around and went home. Kathy and I broke up a few days later, which is cool for me because I don't really like sleeping in parking lots that much. But now, 20 years later, I will never know why that pimp was in a wheelchair. One of the great questions, great unanswered questions of our time. But I actually think about him pretty often. And of course, Pete, Mike, and Edwin, and Kathy, every time I sort of need to remind myself that like not every single element of my life needs to be completely scheduled and pre-planned, and that I am personally capable of taking risks, and that not every single thing that seems unexpected or kind of dangerous will end up with your limbless torso being found on a highway overpass. Thank you.